Okay, guys, let me take a minute to introduce Coach Mike Blaine. He is the head men's basketball coach at Plattsburgh State. He just finished his first season there. He is going to whet the appetite for us and setting the foundation as a new head coach. I have personally known Coach Mike Blaine going on almost 20 years now. I worked camp with him back at West Point Academy before he joined their staff, actually, as the director of basketball operations. Coach Mike Blaine, he's well-traveled on the East Coast. He served as the director of basketball operations also at James Madison University. He's also been an assistant coach at a million places, Cornell University, Maryland Eastern Shore, Radford, Hampton, Sydney. And before taking over at Plattsburgh State, he was the head coach at Medaille College in Buffalo for 5 years. He won 2 Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference championships there, was named the Conference Coach of the Year back in 2017. He's made 2 NCAA tournament appearances while he was there, as well as serving in some NCAA and some athletic department roles. So, Mike Blaine, we're going to give you the floor for about 10 minutes. Thanks for speaking to us and shedding some light on setting the tone and setting the foundation as a new head coach. It's all yours, man.
Excellent. Thanks, Richie. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience stepping in two new situations as a head coach. Both with some limited time. A lot of guys will talk about, 30-day plan, 60-day plan, 90-day plan. My situation, as I'll get to, is kind of unique in the fact that both jobs I accepted when I stepped in as a head coach at Medaille and then at Plattsburgh State, I accepted with about 3 weeks or less. I took the Plattsburgh State job on September 21st, and we started practice October 15th. But that seemed like cake compared to accepting the Medaille job on October 6th and starting practice October 15th. So I've had some unique situations where both of the times I've stepped in have been a little bit tight windows before the start of the season. So I'll kind of just speak to some of my experiences and some general thoughts that we've had along the way. And Richie did a great job, obviously, running down the bio. I don't include this, to talk about where I've been. I've had some great experiences, and Richie certainly touched on that. But as we all look to become head coaches, I hope for those of us that are assistants that you have a variety of experiences as an assistant coach in different programs, because every place I've been, there's been stuff that I didn't quite care for and stuff that I loved. And along the way, in your stops as an assistant coach, you help shape and mold, what your vision is. When I was an assistant coach, I kept a notebook. I still do, thoughts that I would have when I was running my own program, and things I liked, things I didn't like. And every stop I've been, in 6 different schools and in every walk of life, I learned something and I got better at something, and I realized something that helped us become or helped me shape who I was and who I wanted to be as a head coach. So as you set the foundation as a head coach, really, as I look at it, when you're looking to establish your foundation, you need to have an understanding of who you are as a head coach. And your players, administrators, members of your community, they want to know that. They want to know who you are as a head coach when you step into you. What's your story? Can you articulate what brought you to this program? What brought you to this place? How have your previous experiences led you here? What are your principles? What are the things that are absolutely paramount to you as you run your program? You'll see at the bottom, integrity, intensity, intelligence. You'll see that at the bottom of every single one of our slides. Those are our program principles that we believe everything we do in the community, in the classroom, on the court, we're going to act with integrity, we're going to act with intensity, we're going to act with intelligence. And that's what's going to drive our program. And your players want to know that as you're stepping in there. They want to, folks in the community, folks in your program, they want to know, what is your plan? Do you have a plan for how you're going to go about accomplishing the things you want to accomplish? What is your idea in mind? Where do you see things going for you in the program, and how are you going to get there? And then ultimately, again, talking about what are your goals? Do you believe that your goal is to increase your win total, in this first year? Is it, an opportunity to win a conference championship, compete in the NCAA tournament, whatever it is, but know who you are, what you believe, what your plan of action is, and where you ultimately want to take that program. Because if you can clearly establish that, then that allows those in the program to understand, who you are and where you lead to. All right. Next big thing you want to understand when you're setting a foundation as a head coach, who are you coaching? Obviously, most times, unless you're an assistant, you're being elevated into the head coaching position. Most of the time, you're not going to have a great understanding of the student athletes that you're stepping into the program. Maybe you recruited somebody, at a previous institution. Maybe you have a relationship with a coach or another connection to the community, but you probably don't have that firsthand hands-on experience coaching the young people that you're now ultimately responsible for. So you need to find out, what's their past experience been like, because a lot of the times that can shade and that can really, really impact your first few days, your first weeks, your first season even on the job. And it's important to understand the differences there. A good friend of mine, Will Cabrera, is on the call as the head coach at Mount Aloysius. He's stepped in and done a great job at Mount and kind of changing a culture that was really struggling for a long time. I was very fortunate in that both of the situations that I've stepped into as the head coach and became the head coach at Medaille College, previous head coach Mike McDonald did a tremendous job. So, the players that we were with were used to, succeeding at a high level, competing at a high level. So I had, I was looking to adjust my message based on their high level of expectations. Similar at Plattsburgh State, previous head coach Tom Curl did a fantastic job, multiple NCAA tournaments and deep runs. So the guys I took over coaching this year, they were also used to, experience things at the high level. So it's a different understanding, and it's a different level of expectations. Our next point, when you're inheriting a program that's struggled versus stepping into a program that's been successful, and you're now looking, to write that next outstanding chapter. So you experience of the young men in your program, you need to understand what they're expecting out of you, what they're hoping for out of you, what maybe their past experiences with others that they thought were positive, what have those been like? What are they hoping for in this new chapter? Everyone's stepping into a situation with a little bit of own. What is your hopes? What is their hopes for themselves individually, for the program collectively? And then what are the goals of the young men individually and collectively? I want to make sure, anytime I step into a program, we're going to have, collective group meetings, but I want to have one-on-one meetings with each and every single guy in our program to get each of those four, bullet points there covered. So I've got as deep of a picture as I can of the young men that I'm in charge of and that I'm helping to lead and guide in that process. So know who you are, know who you're coaching. All right. Next way to set your foundation is you got to know what are your standards. What are your standards? What are your standards in the community? What are your standards in the classroom? What are your standards in the court, on the court? Can you clearly define them? For us, in the community, we talk about wanting to make sure, that we're respectful to all people at all times. We don't wear hats or hoods inside of our building just as a way to show, to try to show respect for others as we step inside. In the classroom, we make sure that regardless of an instructor's policy, we're not missing any classes. We are making sure that we're engaged, we're completing all of our assignments, no matter what. And then what are your standards when you step on the court? For us, at Plattsburgh State and previously Medaille, one thing that's been absolutely paramount for me is on all sides of the court is communication and enthusiasm. So if we're going to be that, if we're going to have that standard, we're going to be communicating, we're going to be enthusiastic on both sides of the ball as much as possible. On the offensive side of the floor, one of the things that absolutely gets me going is turn the basketball over. So our standards is we're not going to turn the ball over. We're not going to make that happen. We're not going to allow that to happen. Defensively, just one thing that I really try to emphasize is 2 hands high, contested closeouts on every single catch. I will absolutely make sure that every single guy who's stepping onto the ball is throwing 2 hands high on the first catch. Just, those little things. But can you clearly define your standards, and can you define them? Will you defend them? We all know young people, they have a little bit of a curiosity. And a lot of times with a new head coach stepping in, they might want to challenge you a little bit. So can you define why your standards are the way they are, as clearly as possible? And when you get a little bit of pushback, are you willing and able to defend those standards and share why that's for the best interest of the program? So you got to make sure that you know that your standards when you're setting your foundation, as a new head coach. Then when you set your standards and you've announced your standards and you implemented your standards, what is your accountability structure to those standards? How do you track them? When we go into practice every single day, we've got a plus minus sheet that our guys know that we are tracking these things that we value the most. Minuses, middle drives, blow bys, turnovers, things of that nature, pluses, offensive rebounds, assists, being the first guy on the floor to get after a loose ball, taking your charges. But what is your accountability structure? Those things that you're going to value, are you tracking that? Are you monitoring guys and ladies when they're going to class and making sure that they're there? Are we monitoring behavior out in the community? All right. What are those consequences when we don't meet those standards? We all fall short, but it's important to know that when we fall short, there has to be some level of consequence as we set that foundation. On the flip side of things, are we able to how do we positively reinforce those things that we want to hold accountable? Do we make sure that we are championing those second efforts that we talk about so much? Are we rewarding the young men who do those things, or the young ladies who do those things that we do every single day with those opportunities on the floor on game time? And how do we continue to build upon those principles and continue that accountability? Are we, because doing it once, saying, okay, well, we're going to take care we're going to track our offensive rebounding today and who gets on the glass the most, or we're going to track, who closes out with high hands today, or who's talking most on defense. You do it once, but you can't continue you don't continue to repeat that over and over and over again. You're allowing things to wane, and you're not making that a principle and a high standard of your program. So making sure your accountability, you're able to track those things you're trying to be accountable for, that there's consequences for those, that there's reinforcement when they're not met, there's reinforcement when they are met, and that there's continuous evolution and tracking of those principles. And my final kind of page here, just a couple do's and don'ts, things that I've picked up along the way in my experience of stepping in. First, don't ignore the relationships. Anytime we become a head coach, obviously, especially at a collegiate level, or really at a high school level, professional level, there's a million different things that are going to take your attention. Travel situation, what's the meal, uniforms for the guys or ladies, all these different things, tracking academics. Don't allow the minutia, the operational side of things to come at the expense of the relationships that you have. Cooper Calzanetti's on our call right here. Cooper's the director of basketball operations at Towson. I'm very fortunate. He was our first captain in my first year at Medaille. And, I admit that getting the job so late, starting so quickly, I didn't spend as much time in the early going, really hammering those, really setting an exceptional foundation with those guys in the early process. I think, probably took them until about January to make maybe feel like they actually knew who I was and really where we were going with this thing. So that's something I learned from and really tried to establish continuous conversation with our guys as I stepped into the program here at Plattsburgh State. Don't expect them to get it the first time. Odds are good that you are doing something very, very different from what they've previously had. Similar situation at Medaille, played a lot of zone, and Coach McDonald was exceptional to two-guard offense. And one of the guys that asked me, Coach, are we going to continue to run two-guard? Which takes us to our next point. Don't teach what you don't know completely. I didn't know two-guard backwards and forwards. So I had to take what I knew, which was a different type of 4-out-1-in structure, and I had to understand that it was going to take some time for them to get their level of understanding and comprehension to where I wanted it. So don't expect them to get it the first time, but don't teach what you don't know completely. Players know when there's a gap there. Players know when there's a little bit of uncertainty. If they've got a question, they want to know that you know what you're talking about, that you have the right answer for them. So whatever it is, pressing, zone, half-court set in the offense, terminate, whatever it is, make sure that whatever you're teaching, you know what backwards, forwards, left, right, and sideways. There's a lot of ways to play good basketball, but you got to make sure that whatever you teach, you know it cover to cover. Some do's, though, was you step in and establish the culture, your foundation as a new head coach. Do be yourself. You can only be the best version of you. If you're a outgoing guy, be outgoing. Don't get quiet or standoffish. If you're a little bit more reserved, be yourself. Be solid. Be about what you're about. Young people like to see authenticity, and they'll know who's trying to act a certain way. That's not really them. If you want to coach like the coaches you see on TV, then you're not coaching like yourself. So do be yourself. Do remain vigilant amidst the challenges. There's going to be some pushback as you set a foundation, because change is difficult for everybody. So we're putting young people in a position where they're being asked to change, and they're going to challenge that at times. So you've got to remain vigilant. You've got to stay strong and solid there. Do fight for your program every single day, especially as you're stepping into a new situation. The young people in the program know that you have to know that you're on their side, that you are fighting for them, but that ultimately you are fighting for the betterment of the program every single day. You can't afford to have a day off. You can't afford to have a day where you let something slide. You have to make sure that you are resolute and firm in your standards every single day, and that you're going to do absolutely everything possible for your program every single day. And our last do, as you step in as a new head coach and set a foundation, do remember your good fortune. I was an assistant coach for 11 years in various levels of college basketball before I had an opportunity as to get a head coaching job at the college level. There are assistant coaches who have done this for 20, 30 years that never get an opportunity to run their own program. If you have an opportunity to run your own program at any level whatsoever, youth, high school, college, professional, do recognize your good fortune, because it is very, very, very difficult to get a head coaching position. Regardless of the success that you've had, regardless of where you've been, your connections, it is very, very difficult to get a head coaching job. So make sure that you remember your good fortune, and that we are very, very lucky to have an opportunity to shape and mold and help educate young people every single day as we set a foundation as new head.
What was maybe your three biggest things when you took over as a head coach that you just, those are the three biggest things you've got to do? I know people talk about, like Richie was just talking about the 30, 60, 90 days. What were the three?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, I think doing it at Madai, my three things were probably different than doing it at Plattsburgh State. Obviously you learn more anything anytime a second time around. So my first three things, I felt like we needed to establish was, our tone. Basically, I'm a very intense guy. When we step off the floor, I'm as easygoing as they come. But when we're about our business, we're about our business, and that was a bit of an adjustment for both programs. Honestly, I think, again, I'm not saying our way is the best way by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of great ways to coach great basketball, but I came in behind two very successful, very more relaxed, more cerebral coaches. And so, I think the first thing I had to do was change the tone a little bit and make sure that, we knew that, we were, things were shifting gears a little bit, and everybody had to be with that or be trying to be with that. The second thing I think that was important was making sure that our terminology was understood across the board. And that can be hard, obviously, when you're shifting systems. We talk about all the times, we want guys speaking our language, what somebody, we have, special names for different screening actions that we have, or we have different phrases for how we're going to guard something, what somebody might call a lock and trail or a lock and chase. We might say, hey, we're going to get in his numbers and ride him out, whatever it is. And so making sure that everybody was speaking the same language, and that, what you call one thing, I could call another thing, and it's both the same thing. But if if I'm speaking French and you're speaking, Greek, we're not going to understand each other. And so, knowing that. And then the final thing I think that was most important was that, and again, it took me a little while, especially the first time I stepped in, was having the guys know that you're on their side and you're supporting them, because early on you may have to be really, really rigid and really, really difficult with guys, because I've always felt it's a lot easier to let loose of the reins than it is to tighten the reins later. So I didn't do a great job of this my first time at Medaille, and I think I did a better job of it at Plattsburgh. Was that letting guys know, as much as I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to hold you accountable, and I might give you hard times about stuff, I'm going to champion you and celebrate you when we do the right things that much better, And so that was kind of the things that were most important to me: setting the tone, setting our language, and then having guys understand that though I might be difficult, I'm ultimately on their side.
Appreciate it, man.
Coach, so how do you go about teaching a leadership kind of piece in all this stuff here with you guys?
That's a great question, because it's tough when your inherent leaders are guys that you may not know exceptionally well. I would try. I was fortunate that both times we stepped in, we had veterans that were used to being successful, so that that made it a little less of starting from scratch and a little more of, okay, here's what we're emphasizing now, as opposed to maybe what you guys have emphasized in the past. So I tried to do a much better job of having more frequent conversation with our leaders in the program, certainly this time around at Plattsburgh, so that they at least understood where I was coming from. Fortunately, they bought in regardless, but I wanted them to at least know know the why. Basically, that's a big thing for our program, is know why we're doing what we're doing. When I worked for Coach Cruz at Army, that was a big thing for him. Is he never want he would always say, you never want a guy to say he's doing something because Coach told me to. Always know the why. And so I felt like I did a better job a second time stepping in short order, explaining our why behind the what that we were doing.
I have a question real quickly. So I know you're at Cornell. So going from there to D3, right, where you go from the riches to possibly the not so.
Yes.
So how did you I guess balance that, right?
I think I alluded to it earlier, is the breadth and the depth of my experiences previously. Certainly that was a very big 180 from Cornell, but what it was very, very similar to was my time as an assistant at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which is Division I, but in the MEAC, basically, where we're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. We need to get guarantee money, we need to find ways to scrape and save and put it together. And so I took a lot of those. I took a lot of my experiences at UMES, which was just a remarkable class on starting a program from scratch. That was the only time as an assistant I came in year one, basically, which was an eye-opening experience for me, to kind of come in on the ground floor with Coach Allen and be a part of building something piece by piece when before there was none. So that was learning how to do more with less at Eastern Shore. You still had your scholarship, sure, but everything else was bare bones. And taking that idea and that amount of creativity you have to have was tremendous for me, and really, really valuable, stepping into Medaille, where literally we had the uniforms and that was it, and the rest of it we had to figure out as we went, basically.
What do you look for in terms of recruits? In terms of do you look at their character, or do you look at anything else, particularly like the non-negotiables that you spoke of earlier?
We're looking first and foremost at character. I think anytime you recruit, winning basketball games at the college level is hard. I don't care what level you're at. Junior college, AIA, D3, ACC, whatever it is, winning college basketball games is hard. It's a lot harder when you don't like or can't trust or count on the guys in your program. And so first and foremost, we want to make sure we've got great people, guys that we know are going to represent us, going to do the right things. Do we fall short at times? Yeah, we're these are 20-year-old kids that we're coaching. We make mistakes, but we're looking for the right kind of people that we want to be around. I think one of the coaches in our breakout group alluded, guys you can lose with before you win with them, and so if you got a group that is committed to doing the right things off the court, then it's a lot easier to do the right things on the court. So great people, invested students. Obviously, we're a Division III level, and I think any college basketball coach would say the academics need to come first. So they don't have to be Rhodes Scholars and rocket scientists, but you want kids that put pride in their classes. And then you're looking for the talent that you need with the on-court demeanor that you want in your program. I have a hard time with guys that don't have a serious approach to the game. Basically, that's a hard one for me, because it's hard to coach that out of guys. It really, really is. And if you spend all your time coaching effort, as we all know, you're spending less time coaching basketball. So that's a big challenge.